What is up, everybody? Everyday Angler here. Today we're gonna do a fly tying video. This is a really buggy fly. When I tie buggy flies, I like them to be like buggy, right? So they're not gonna be maybe a little disproportionate, just maybe a little unnatural. If anything, I don't even really go for the realistic crayfish look. I buy flies that look like realistic crayfish, but as far as tying, I really like these creature flies. When I'm tying flies, I'm mostly wanting them to move a certain way or give them a certain type of action, and that's why I tie them the way I do, rather than trying to mimic some type of food source for the fish. You guys know I mostly fish for bass, so mimicking is great, but a lot of the time what you're trying to do is trigger a strike. So if I want something that I'm going to be fishing slow, I want it to move as much as possible when I'm not stripping it. If I want something that I'm going to be stripping fast, marabou pulses, zonker pulses, but really you're just burning a fly. That's when I like using bucktail. But today's fly has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So this is kind of like the monster bugger. I tie a fly called the ugly bugger. Everything's just kind of a bugger, really, when it comes to buggy flies, right? Creature flies. So this is a monster bugger, and it was actually inspired by Gallup's bottoms up, and I think kingfisher fly. I'll put it, if I'm wrong, I'll put a little description in there. But you've heard me talk about adding weight to the back of your fly to get it to dance a little more. Today we're actually going to do the opposite and add some type of floating to the back of the fly to give us that really dramatic jig action. Kelly Gallup talks about that in his bottoms up fly, and I tied one of them, you know, his exact pattern, and I was like, yeah, this is like the only way you should be tying jig flies. So I'm going to talk about it as we get to tying, so let's get started. First thing we're going to grab is a 25mm fish spine. So we got our end of our fish spine that we kind of connect to other shanks, and then we've got this not open end, but just kind of the hook eye end over here. We are going to cut the hook eye end off, just like that. And then I'm going to get this is the smallest double barrel, This is the smallest double barrel popper head that you can get. It's like the panfish one. And what we're gonna do, so we're gonna build this fly. This is gonna connect to our hook. This is the tail end of the fly, okay? But what I'm gonna do is stick this, and you'll see why I'm doing this, don't worry. Stick that right through there just like that. So we're actually putting the head on what seems like backwards right now, which it is. You'll see why, don't worry. It's just easier to stick that way. Okay, now we got our head on backwards like that. Let me get something to try to lift this. Alright, so now we've got our popper head in. So I'm actually going to start my thread in front of the popper head right here. Now this is kind of overly complicated. You could use 2 hooks, but I don't know. Whenever I have like a stinger on a hook, I mean, I use them. I definitely use them. I just feel like there's so much more like foul hook in the throat going on. Next, we're going to use some black marabou. This is nothing special, just black marabou. I'm going to make my tail almost double the length of the shank. And I'm going to tie it in right in front of that double barrel popper head. Just like that. I grab it and twist it, make this a lot easier to cut. Oh, did not mean to do that. So there we go on that. Gonna give a good thread bump over here. Just quick half hitch. Boom. Now we're gonna get some Loctite. This is the gel control. Put a generous amount right there. And I'm going to move my popper head up. Just like that. So this back portion, obviously it does not have a keel, which means like obviously there's no hook point that's going to be keeping this thing staying true a certain way. So it really doesn't matter where that popper head sits. All that popper head is a piece of foam that's going to make this tail float. And then our front hook is going to be weighted. So it's going to be doing like a very exaggerated jigging motion. And the only reason I like the popper heads, you don't have to use a double barrel, you can use like the Wapsi ones that come really small, is it's a lot of foam in a small area rather than trying to stack little pieces of foam on it, you know, that's gonna float like crazy. All right, so now we're gonna use this mini barred marabou in olive and black. And honestly, that chartreuse head is just the one I grabbed. I usually, if anything, I try to grab something that's a little different like that, because it'll just be like a little hidden hot spot on this fly. So I like these little pieces of marabou. I use them in like my little panfish flies. You've probably seen me use it before. What we're gonna do is we're actually gonna palmer this marabou. We're not just gonna tie it in like regular people, right? The other thing you got to remember with this, especially the mini ones, is the stems on this are very thin compared to regular marabou stems. So I'm going to tie in the tip. I just cut my tip square. You guys know these are not really instructional. It's kind of, you already know how to tie flies. I'm just showing you how to tie this one. So I'm going to palmer this marabou. Alright, so there you go. This is pretty much our tail. Just gonna hit it with a few whip finishes and some bone dry. Alright, so this is our tail. Now the only thing I will do that's kind of different is, remember we cut this shank? I'm gonna dig through here. And this one is barely exposed, but there's a little bit of that shank exposed. You can't really see it. I'm gonna go in and cut that off, because that is just a little sharp edge that could get stuck on your leader or something while you're fighting a fish that I don't want there. So obviously this looks really nasty and spread out right now, but in the water you'll get this pulsing, a little bit of black under there, and olive. Super simple. And it looks just so ugly right now, but we'll see. You'll see, I mean. Okay. Okay, our hook of choice is... Where's the packet? Where is the freaking packet? Okay. A-Rex Salt Jig Hook, number 6. Okay, there must be something going on. Give me a second. So this is actually going to be super simple. The fly is pretty much done as far as any type of like fly tying technique is concerned. All it was, the hardest thing was just to palmer the marabou, and I'm pretty sure y'all can do that. And if you can't, there's nothing wrong with that. You just got to do it. This fly is going to catch fish. You know, it doesn't have to look perfect. That's why I like buggy flies. All right. weights. So pretty much as heavy as you can throw is what I like, because just like I talked about before, counterweighting, if I put weight back here, not on a jig hook, but it's gonna make that fly dance. So what we're trying to do is just get the ultimate jig. So if we put a lot of weight right here, and then we got pretty much a big old pretty much a popper head back there on the tail. As this goes down, the tail's gonna go up. And when you strip it up, you know, it's just, I wish I could get some underwater footage for you. It's kind of tricky to do by yourself, but you can tie it as big or as small as you want. Uses more foam, less foam, start experimenting. This is just what I found I like, and I like putting a little heavier weight up front. So these are gonna be some pretty exaggerated eyes for this fly. Well, not exaggerated, but big. For those of you that don't know, I work on cars and big trucks and stuff like that. This is actually a UV light that you use to work on AC. So if you don't want to spend 60 bucks on like a loon light or something, just go on Amazon and find yourself a UV light to work on AC, and they're already like the strongest lights you can get for cheaper. But don't tell Loon I told you that, because I'm trying to get sponsored. I'm just kidding. Okay. Wire, we need wire. There it is. I just like using the beat-along stuff. It's just cheap. Actually, I'm gonna use a little bit thicker wire. I'm just gonna play it safe and run this wire down the whole shank. Another cool thing is, because we use this shank like I was talking about earlier, this thing really doesn't have a keel or anything. This tail is just going to be dancing all over the place. And I got it like game changer close, if you can see that, how close the tail is to this thing. Because I really want that foam back here to affect how this is going to fish. So if I put it way back here, it's going to be a longer delay for when that tail comes up and down, right? I actually fished this one on the Flint when I was fishing for shoal. I didn't catch anything on it, but oops. But those fish were kind of being really, they weren't being bass that day. At least not the section that we were floating. And this is really cool because you can fish it like a jig fly, like jig, jig, pause, jig, jig, pause. Or you can let this thing hit the bottom and this tail is going to be dancing up there. Alright, bone dry. Bone dry. Where is it? Where did I just put it? This is Solarez, by the way. Solarez bone dry. I'm not going to hit that with the light. I'm just going to let that soak. Okay. Black marabou. Now this time I am going to look for a certain feather that's just short with little poofy fibers. All I'm trying to do is veil that olive just a little bit, because the olive is the star of the show. And I'm not going to palmer this, actually. I'm just going to kind of try to spread it around my hook before I tie it down. Kind of like a bucktail technique, but for marabou. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you have a bunch of empty gaps, but it worked this time. Yeah, it works pretty good this time. Okay, so like I said, marabou, this thing's gonna be like floating, fluttering everywhere. Next step, it's a Spawn's Creeper Chenille in black. This is just like the type of stuff that's just like, what? I mean, I'll tie like woolly buggers with this stuff, you know? I mean, there is something about having actual hackle, but this stuff is just like automatically buggy. And I'm actually gonna combine it with medium polar chenille in black, just to add a little bit of flash. And that that creeper chenille is pretty thick stuff. And you can, this creeper chenille, you can peel it back just like regular chenille and just tie in the rope part itself, which is what I'm gonna do. Okay. Now, before we go any further, silly legs. These are off of a bass skirt, olive and black. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna turn my fly how it's gonna ride pretty much. I'm gonna lay these right behind my eyes, right on top of the fly, under the hook shank. I don't know. It gets confusing when you're tying one upside down like this. Give it a few good thread wraps. That's not gonna go anywhere. I'm gonna advance my thread to the very front. And then just to help us with this chenille that we're about to palmer, I'm just gonna do 2 wraps right up here. And that'll hopefully keep this thing away from the chenille. Okay. And you can just twist this. If I had my gator clips, which I have them somewhere, I just can't find them. This would be a good time to use them. So you can barely see it, but it just, that polar, that reflector chenille, what is it called again? Polar chenille just gives it that little bit of flash. And I am going to be moving these fibers back as we go too. Time to let go of my silly legs. Bring these guys back. Yeah. Tell me that don't look good. Tying this off is honestly probably the trickiest part. Ah. Alrighty, so here it is. I would say about 4 or 5 inches. Just a sweet little smallmouth spotted bass. I'm sure a panfish will take it, but as far as only having a hook up front, it's definitely a bass fly. Tie some up. Like I said, in the beginning when I first started doing fly tying videos, I mentioned these are not like how-to videos, right? These are just, I like to explain why I tie them the way I do. So this is just something unique that you guys can try out. Put a little foam back there. You can even do like a bait fish version. Just put white marabou back here and like some crystal chenille for the body. Be a pretty cool little dying bait fish, definitely imitation. So thank you for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys next time on another episode of The Everyday Angler.